The wind cut through Promise Creek like a rusted blade, carrying ice and the smell of coming snow. Clara Dane pulled her worn coat tighter, though it did little against the December cold seeping through threadbare wool. Her boots, men's boots, too large and stuffed with newspaper, crunched against the frozen dirt road as she made her way toward the cluster of buildings that passed for a town. She'd been walking for 3 days. Her back stayed straight despite the ache in her shoulders, despite the emptiness in her stomach that had moved past hunger into a dull, constant companion. Clara had learned young that showing weakness invited worse than cold or hunger. It invited pity. And pity came with a price she couldn't afford to pay. Promise Creek sat in a valley between 2 ridges, smoke rising from chimneys like prayers nobody expected answered. The general store's windows glowed yellow with lamplight. But Clara didn't slow her pace. She had 17 cents in her coat pocket and pride enough to keep walking past warmth she couldn't buy. The abandoned corn shed stood at the edge of town, its door hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Clara had spotted it that morning from the ridge, empty, forgotten, with gaps between the boards that would let in wind but might keep out the worst of the snow. It would do. It had to. She pushed inside, her eyes adjusting to the dimness. Mice had been here, leaving droppings and shredded grain sacks in the corners. The roof sagged in the middle, and frost glittered on the walls where moisture had seeped through. But it had 4 walls and most of a roof. After 3 nights sleeping rough, it looked like a palace. Clara sank onto an overturned crate, finally letting her shoulders drop. Her hands, rough from years of farm work, trembled as she pulled them from her pockets. Not from cold, from the effort of keeping them still while she walked through town, while strangers' eyes tracked her movement with the sharp interest small towns reserved for outsiders. A woman alone meant trouble or scandal. A woman alone in winter meant desperation. Clara was both, but she'd learned to wear neither on her face. She'd left the family ranch 17 days ago, in the gray hour before dawn when even the roosters still slept. Left her stepfather's house with its low ceilings and lower expectations, where her worth had been measured in cooking and cleaning and keeping quiet when Harold Briggs came calling with his 40 years and wandering hands, and promises to her stepfather about merging properties. "You're 23, her stepfather had said, his face red from whiskey and righteous anger when she'd refused Briggs for the 3rd time. "Past time you earned your keep proper. Your mother knew her place." Her mother had died knowing her place worn down to nothing by her second husband's demands, and the 6 children that came after Clara. Children who learned quick that their half-sister's height and strong back meant she could take the beatings meant for them. Children who watched from doorways as Clara stood between them and their father's fists, taking the bruises so they didn't have to. She'd protected them until they grew old enough to protect themselves. Then she'd refused Harold Briggs one last time, packed what would fit in a flour sack, and left before her stepfather could make good on his promise to beat sense into her or drag her to Briggs's ranch himself. That was 17 days and a lifetime ago. The corn shed creaked in the wind, and Clara forced herself to move. Survival meant action, even when exhaustion made her bones feel like lead. She gathered the least rotted grain sacks, shaking out mouse droppings and arranging them in the driest corner. It would be a hard bed, but better than frozen ground. Her stomach cramped, reminding her that she'd eaten her last heel of bread yesterday morning. The 17 cents in her pocket would buy a few crackers at the general store, maybe some salt pork if the owner was generous. But that would mean walking back through town, past the saloon where men gathered to drink and gossip, past the boarding house where proper women lived under the watchful eye of Mrs. Henderson, who was known 3 counties over for her ability to sniff out scandal. Clara stayed where she was. Night fell fast in December, dropping like a curtain between one breath and the next. The temperature plummeted with it. Clara wrapped herself in the grain sacks, trying to ignore the smell of mold and mouse, trying to pretend her coat was thicker. Her boots didn't have holes. Her pride could keep her warm. It couldn't. By full dark, her teeth chattered so hard she thought they might crack. The wind found every gap in the walls, turning the shed into a funnel for winter's worst intentions. Clara pulled her knees to her chest, making herself small despite her height, despite years of being told she took up too much space. The storm hit near midnight. It came howling down from the mountains like something alive and angry, bringing snow that didn't fall so much as a tack. Within minutes, the gaps in the walls turned white with driven snow. The temperature dropped further, past cold into something that had its own weight, its own teeth. Clara had grown up in hard country. She knew winter, knew survival, but she also knew the signs of a killing storm. And this had all of them. The kind of cold that made people sleepy, the kind that whispered lies about how warm it would be to just close your eyes. Just for a moment. She forced herself to move, stamping her feet, swinging her arms. Motion meant life. Stillness meant death. But each movement came harder. Each thought moved slower. The grain sacks provided no protection against cold this fierce. Her mother had frozen to death, not outside, inside her own heart, frozen solid by a life that offered no warmth, no kindness, no hope for anything better. Clara had watched it happen, had sworn she'd choose the clean cold of winter over the slow freeze of surrender. Now, with her limbs going numb and her thoughts scattered like snow, she wondered if there was really any difference. The shed door slammed open. Clara tried to stand, tried to run, but her legs wouldn't work right. A figure filled the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a heavy coat that spoke of money or at least sense enough to prepare for weather. "Anyone in here?" A man's voice, rough but not unkind. Clara's voice stuck in her throat like ice. The man stepped inside, bringing a lantern that threw wild shadows on the walls. Light found her in the corner, huddled in her nest of grain sacks, and he stopped short. Jesus Christ. He crossed the shed in 3 strides, setting down the lantern to crouch beside her. Clara tried to pull back, but her body wouldn't cooperate. The man's face came into focus, weathered but not old, maybe 35, with eyes the color of winter sky and a scar across his left eyebrow. "How long you been here?" He didn't wait for an answer, just pulled off his coat and wrapped it around her. It was still warm from his body, smelled like leather and wood smoke and safety. "Can you stand?" Clara tried, her legs folded. The man caught her before she hit the ground, one arm around her waist, holding her steady without making her feel trapped. "All right, we're getting you somewhere warm." "Can't," Clara's voice came out cracked. "No money." "Didn't ask for any." He studied her face in the lantern light. "You got anywhere to go?" Clara's silence was answer enough. "Right then." He pulled her arm over his shoulders, taking most of her weight. "My place is up the ridge. You make it that far, you can have the barn. It's warm. Got a stove?" "Why?" The words scraped out of her throat. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. "Because I found a woman freezing to death in Charlie Murphy's old corn shed, and I'm not the kind of man who walks away from that." He half carried her from the shed into the full force of the storm. Clara wanted to protest, wanted to insist she could take care of herself, but her body had moved past pride into pure survival. She leaned on this stranger because the alternative was dying in a corn shed, and she'd come too far to let Harold Briggs and her stepfather win that easy. The walk up the ridge took forever and no time at all. Clara's awareness narrowed to the man's steady presence, the warmth of his coat, the sureness of his steps even in the driving snow. He didn't speak, didn't ask questions she couldn't answer, just got her where she needed to be. The cabin materialized out of the storm like something from a story, solid log walls, smoke rising from a stone chimney, windows glowing with promised warmth. But the man turned toward a barn set back from the house, just as he'd said. Inside, it smelled of hay and horses and blessed warmth from a small iron stove in the corner. The man she didn't even know his name settled her on a bench near the heat. "Wait here." He disappeared into the storm, returning with blankets, a bucket of water, and a basket that made Clara's stomach clench with hunger even as pride made her want to refuse. Eat. He set the basket beside her. Drink. Get warm. There's a cot in the tack room. Clean hay in the loft if you prefer. I'll check in the morning. He turned to go. Why? Clara asked again. He paused at the door, not looking back. My brother died in a storm like this. Found him in the morning. 100 yards from shelter he couldn't find in the dark. A pause. Name's Eli Kerrigan. Ranch is mine. Barn's yours long as you need it. Door locks from the inside. Then he was gone, leaving Clara alone with warmth and food and the first real kindness she'd felt in 17 days. She ate slowly, bread and cheese and dried apples, forcing herself not to wolf it down. Drank water that didn't taste of melting snow. Let the stove's heat work, feeling back into her fingers and toes, bringing pain that meant she'd keep them all. Later, wrapped in blankets on the narrow cot, Clara stared at the barn's sturdy walls and tried to make sense of it. Eli Kerrigan, a man who'd found a desperate woman and offered shelter without conditions, without payment, without even asking her name. The storm raged outside, but Clara was warm, safe, alive. Tomorrow would bring questions who she was, where she'd come from, what she planned to do. Tomorrow would bring the need to move on before she brought trouble to the door of the first person in years to show her simple decency. But tonight, she had shelter. She had food in her belly and heat in her bones and a door that locked from the inside. For tonight, that was enough. For tonight, she could stop running. Clara woke to sunlight streaming through barn walls and the sound of horses stirring in their stalls. For a moment, she couldn't place where she was the warmth, the safety, the absence of fear felt foreign after weeks of running. Then memory returned the storm, the corn shed. Eli Kerrigan's steady hands pulling her from the edge of freezing. She sat up slowly, muscles protesting. The barn was warmer than any shelter she'd had in days, the small stove still radiating heat. Someone had fed it during the night. Fresh wood stacked beside it hadn't been there when she'd fallen asleep. A bucket of clean water sat near the stove with a bar of soap and a folded towel. Clara stared at these simple things, throat tight. She'd grown used to taking care of herself, to expecting nothing from anyone. Kindness without strings attached felt more dangerous than winter storms. She washed quickly, finger combing her dark hair into something presentable. Her dress was travel-worn and patched, but clean enough. She'd kept it that way through everything, knowing that respectability was armor, even threadbare. The barn door opened, bringing cold air and Eli Kerrigan. He looked different in daylight, taller than she'd realized, with brown hair that needed cutting and those winter sky eyes that seemed to see too much. He carried a tray that smelled of coffee and something that made her stomach clench with hunger. Morning. He set the tray on a barrel near the stove. Storm passed. Roads won't be clear for days, though. Clara stood, forcing her spine straight despite how much she wanted to curl toward the warmth of food and fire. I appreciate the shelter. Mr. Kerrigan, I'll be moving on. To where? The question was mild, but it stopped her cold. To where? Indeed, she had no answer that wouldn't sound like what it was a woman with no plans beyond survival, no destination beyond away. Sit, Eli said. Eat, then we'll talk practical. Something in his tone, not commanding but certain, made her sit. The tray held porridge with cream, toast with butter, coffee black and strong, simple food that tasted better than any feast because she hadn't had to beg for it. Eli leaned against a stall door, watching her eat with those careful eyes. You know anything about horses? Clara paused, spoon halfway to her mouth. Why? Got 6 horses need looking after. Usually handle it myself, but my hand's been acting up since I broke it last month. He flexed his right hand, showing fingers that didn't quite close right. Could use help till the bones finish mending. Work for room and board, plus $1 a week. Clara set down the spoon carefully. You don't know anything about me. Know you were freezing to death in Charlie Murphy's shed rather than ask for charity. Know you've got enough pride to choke on. Know you're running from something. But you're not the kind of trouble I need to worry about. How do you know that? He shrugged. Been reading people long enough. You're not a thief. Thieves don't walk past the general store with empty pockets. You're not working the line. Those girls know better than to freeze alone. You're just someone who needed shelter and was too proud to ask for it. The accuracy of his assessment made her chest tight. I don't need pity. Good. I'm not offering any. I'm offering work because I need help and you need somewhere to stay till you figure out where you're going. He straightened. Barn's warm. Got the tack room you can make private. Meals in the kitchen I cook simple, but there's plenty. No questions if you don't want to answer them. Clara looked at her hands. Work rough and capable. She thought of the 17 cents in her pocket, the holes in her boots, the memory of that killing cold. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. But this wasn't charity. This was work. All right. Something relaxed in Eli's shoulders. Good. Finish eating. I'll show you what needs doing. The barn held 6 horses, 2 draft horses for heavy work, 3 riding horses, and a pretty little mare with a coat like polished copper. They whickered when Eli approached. Pressing against stall doors for attention, he gave freely, speaking to each in a low voice that made them ear-flick with pleasure. This is Brick and Mason, he said of the draft horses. They're brothers, gentle as lambs if you're fair with them. The bay is Scout, the paint is Trouble Name Fits, and the black is Midnight, the mare's Penny, on account of her coat. Clara moved among them slowly, letting them get used to her scent, her presence. Horses had always made sense to her in ways people didn't. They were honest in their needs, clear in their communication. A horse might hurt you, but never from meanness, only fear or pain. You know your way around them. Eli watched her check Penny's hooves with practiced ease. Had horses growing up? Before her mother remarried? Before everything changed? These are well cared for. Try to be. He showed her where the feed was kept, the routine for mucking stalls, the way each horse liked to be groomed. His hands might be injured, but his knowledge was thorough, his affection for the animals clear in every gesture. They worked in companionable silence. Clara taking over the tasks that required grip strength while Eli directed and assisted. He didn't hover or criticize. Just let her work. Let her prove herself through action rather than words. By noon, the barn was spotless. The horses fed and watered and turned out into the small paddock where they could roll in snow and sun. Clara's muscles ached pleasantly from real work, honest work, the kind that left you tired but not diminished. Kitchen's this way, Eli said, leading her to the cabin. It was smaller than she'd expected, but neat as the barn, with a stone fireplace, sturdy furniture, and windows that let in winter light. Books lined one wall, more books than she'd ever seen outside a schoolhouse. Maps covered another wall, territorial maps, survey maps, some marked with notes in a careful hand. Wash up, Eli said, indicating a basin. I'll get dinner on. She washed while he moved around the kitchen with the same quiet efficiency he'd shown in the barn. Soon, the smell of beans and cornbread filled the small space, making her stomach remind her that porridge had been hours ago. They ate at the rough wooden table, snow light streaming through windows. Eli didn't try to fill the silence with chatter, didn't ask the questions she could see him thinking. He just passed the cornbread when her bowl emptied, poured coffee when her cup ran low, treated her like a person with a right to her own thoughts. Been ranching here long? Clara finally asked, needing to give something since he'd asked for nothing. 5 years. Came out from Missouri with my brother Tom, planning to make our fortune. His jaw tightened slightly. Tom died the second winter. I stayed. She heard the weight in those simple words, the grief that had settled into the bones of this place. I'm sorry. A long time ago, but his eyes said otherwise. What about you? You're not from around here. Nebraska. True enough. Family farm. Also true. if you didn't count how it had stopped being her family's the day her mother married Walter Dane. Eli nodded, accepting the partial truth without pushing. Well, you're here now. That's what matters. They settled into a routine over the following days. Clara rose early to tend the horses, worked through the day at whatever tasks needed doing, shared quiet meals in the kitchen. Eli gave her space in the barn to make a proper room in what had been a storage area. Even brought a small rug and a better cot from the house. Don't need much, she'd protested. Need and want aren't the same thing, he'd replied, and that was that. He was unlike any man she'd known. He worked hard, but without the harsh edge her stepfather brought to labor. He spoke to the horses like friends, read books in the evening by lamplight, treated her with a careful respect that never tipped into either familiarity or distance. When his injured hand pained him, he didn't take it out on anyone else, just rubbed it absently and kept working. Why'd you really stop to check that shed? Clara asked one evening as they brought the horses in from paddock. The question had been building for days. Eli paused, leading Scout into his stall. Used to be Tom's favorite place to sneak off and read when we were surveying the valley. He'd take a book and disappear for hours, come back covered in corn dust and talking about whatever story had caught him. He latched the stall door carefully. I check it sometimes. Habit, I guess. Looking for ghosts. Looking for brothers. He half smiled, sad and accepting. Same thing, maybe. Clara understood. She had her own ghosts, her mother's worn face, her half-siblings' frightened eyes, the girl she'd been before life taught her to make herself small and hard and ready to run. Thank you, she said quietly, for checking. Eli looked at her then, really looked at her, and something passed between them in the barn's warm dimness. Not attraction too early for that, too much unknown, but recognition. Two people who'd learned to live with empty spaces, who knew how to work through pain, who understood that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was not ask questions. Storm's coming again, he said finally. Probably be snowed in for a week or more. Clara heard what he wasn't saying. She was safe here. Welcome here, for as long as winter kept the world at bay. After was a bridge she'd cross when the snow melted. Better bring extra hay down from the loft, she said. Better had, he agreed. They worked together as evening fell, preparing for another storm. But this time, Clara wasn't afraid of the weather. She had sturdy walls around her, honest work for her hands, and a quiet man who asked no questions she wasn't ready to answer. It wasn't home. She didn't know what that meant anymore. But it was shelter, freely given and fairly earned. For now, for this suspended moment between storms, it was enough. The needle slipped through fabric with practiced ease, Clara's fingers remembering the rhythm even after weeks of rough travel. She'd found Eli's mending basket by accident while cleaning the kitchen shirts with torn seams, trousers with ripped knees, socks worn thin at the heels. The pile spoke of a man who'd been making do, patching what he could with clumsy stitches that wouldn't hold. She'd brought the basket to the barn that evening without asking. Some things didn't need permission. Now, by lamplight in her makeshift room, she worked through the pile methodically. The repetitive motion soothed something in her chest, made her feel useful in a way that went beyond feeding horses and mucking stalls. Her mother had taught her to sew before Walter Dane came into their lives, back when there had been time for such gentle teaching. Your hands tell your story, her mother had said, guiding Clara's young fingers. Keep them busy, keep them skilled, and you'll always have worth beyond what others try to give you. Those words had proven true in ways her mother never intended. A knock at the barn door made her look up. Eli stood in the doorway, snow dusting his shoulders, carrying a pot of something that steamed in the cold air. Thought you might want coffee, he said, then noticed the shirt in her hands. His expression shifted surprise, then something softer. You don't need to do that. Needs doing. Clara tied off a stitch, bit the thread. Unless you prefer shirts held together with hope and baling wire. He almost smiled. She was learning to read the subtle shifts in his expression, the way humor lived in the corners of his eyes even when his mouth stayed serious. Hope's worked so far. Hope's not much good against winter wind. She folded the finished shirt, reached for another. Sit, if you want. Coffee smells good. He settled on an overturned crate, pouring coffee into 2 cups he'd brought. The barn felt smaller with him in it, but not uncomfortable. Clara had learned to judge the weight of a man's presence, knew the difference between those who filled space with threat and those who simply existed solid and real. Eli was the latter, substantial but not imposing. "Where'd you learn to sew like that?" He watched her hands work, quick and sure. "My mother—" Truth was easier when you could parcel it out in small pieces. "She took in mending when times were lean, taught me young. Useful skill. Kept us fed more than once." Clara examined a rip in the trouser knee, planning her approach. "This looks like barbed wire." "Probably was. Fence needed fixing last month." He sipped his coffee, steam rising between them. "You got family waiting somewhere, someone who'll be worrying." The question was gentle, but it still made her chest tight. "No." He accepted that, didn't push. They sat in companionable quiet while she sewed. The only sounds, the whisper of thread through fabric and horses shifting in their stalls. Scout whickered softly, probably dreaming of summer grass. "Had a letter from town today?" Eli said eventually. "Widow Morrison's looking for help with spring cleaning. Mentioned she'd pay fair wages." Clara's needle paused. He was offering her options. She realized a way forward that didn't involve running or hiding. "That's kind of you to mention." "Not kind, practical. You won't want to stay in my barn forever." "Won't I?" The words slipped out before she could stop them, carrying more truth than she'd meant to share. Eli looked at her directly then, those winter sky eyes steady. "You're welcome here long as you need. Just figured you might want to know there's other choices, when you're ready." She bent back to her sewing, throat tight. Choices. Such a simple word for something she'd never really had. "I'll think on it." "Fair enough." He finished his coffee, rose to leave. At the door, he paused. "Clara." She looked up, startled. He'd never used her name before, though she'd told it to him days ago. It sounded different in his careful voice, not owned or claimed, just acknowledged. "Thank you for the mending." Then he was gone, leaving her with a pile of clothes and the warm confusion of being seen without being possessed. The next morning brought fresh snow and a problem Penny was favoring her left rear hoof. Clara found it while doing morning rounds, the mare shifting weight uncomfortably, reluctant to let it bear full burden. "Easy, girl." Clara ran practiced hands down Penny's leg, feeling for heat or swelling. "Let's take a look." The mare trusted her enough now to lift the hoof without fuss. Clara found the problem quickly, a stone wedged deep in the frog, creating pressure with every step. She'd need the farrier's tools from the barn wall. Steady hands and patience. "Got yourself in trouble, didn't you?" she murmured, reaching for the pick. "Don't worry, we'll fix it." She was so focused on the delicate work of extraction that she didn't hear Eli approach until his shadow fell across the stall door. "Need help?" "Almost got it." Clara worked the pick carefully, mindful of the sensitive tissue. The stone came free suddenly, and Penny stamped in relief. "There, better." The mare nuzzled Clara's shoulder in answer. Looking for the treat she'd learned came with cooperation. Clara produced a withered apple from her pocket, letting Penny lip it from her palm. "You're good with them." Eli entered the stall, checking Clara's work with expert eyes. "Clean extraction. She'll be fine by tomorrow." "She's easy to work with, sweet-tempered." Clara stroked Penny's neck, feeling the mare lean into the touch. "Someone trained her well. Tom did. He had a way with the nervous ones. Said they just needed to know someone was listening." Eli's voice carried that particular softness that came when he mentioned his brother. Penny was his last project before the storm, before the ending. Clara heard what he didn't say. She knows she was loved, Clara said quietly. It shows in how she trusts. Eli looked at her then, something shifting in his expression. Yes, I suppose it does. They stood together in the stall, Penny content between them. And Clara felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the simple peace of shared understanding, of working alongside someone who saw the same truths you did. No demands, no expectations, just two people caring for what needed care. I'll poultice that hoof to be safe, Clara said, breaking the moment before it could become something she'd have to run from. Good idea. Supplies are in the tack room. They worked together through the morning, tending the horses, mending fence where snow had revealed weak spots, hauling water from the well. Clara's body remembered this kind of labor honest, physical, with clear purpose and visible results. So different from the endless, thankless work of her stepfather's house, where nothing was ever enough, ever right, ever hers. Over lunch, venison stew Eli had started at dawn. He spread papers on the kitchen table. Need to go to town tomorrow if the roads are clear. Get supplies before the next storm hits. Clara tensed despite herself. Town meant people, meant questions, meant the risk of being seen by someone who might know her stepfather, might have heard he was looking for his runaway daughter. I can stay with the horses, she offered. Eli looked up from his list. Could use the help loading supplies, but if you'd rather not. She heard what he wasn't saying, that hiding forever wasn't a solution, that at some point she'd have to decide whether she was staying or going. The kindness of the choice, the lack of pressure, made her braver than demands would have. I'll come. His nod was matter of fact, but she caught the pleased surprise in his eyes before he bent back to his list. Need anything particular? Boots, if there's money for it. These won't last another month. She showed him the split sole, newspaper peeking through. Boots. Then, Swanson's should have your size. He made a note, casual as if buying boots for barn help was normal. Expected, nothing worth commenting on. That evening, she brought the mended clothes to the house. Eli was reading by the fire, spectacles perched on his nose, making notes in a book's margins. He looked younger in the firelight, less weathered, and Clara realized he might not be as old as she'd first thought. 30, maybe, or barely past it. Young to be so alone. Mending's done. She set the folded clothes on a chair. He removed his spectacles, rubbing eyes tired from close work. Appreciate it. What do I owe you? Nothing. Already paying me for horsework. Mending's extra. So's room and board and not asking questions I can't answer. She kept her voice firm. We're square. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, but I'm buying those boots tomorrow without argument. Wouldn't dream of arguing, which was true. Pride had its limits, and frozen toes were one of them. Glad we understand each other. He gestured to a chair. Coffee's hot, if you want, or there's tea, found some in town last week. She hesitated. The barn was safer, maintaining the boundaries that kept this arrangement clear, but the fire was warm. The chair looked comfortable, and she was tired of running from every small kindness. Tea sounds good. They sat by the fire as snow began falling again, not speaking much, just existing in the same space without demand or expectation. Eli returned to his book, something about soil management, while Clara sipped tea that tasted of summer herbs in the middle of winter's grip. She found herself stealing glances at him, this quiet man who'd offered shelter without conditions. His injured hand still gave him trouble. She could see it in how he held the book, adjusting frequently to ease the ache. Tomorrow she'd suggest a poultice for that too, if he'd let her. What are you reading? He looked up, surprised by the question. Trying to figure out better irrigation for the lower field? Floods every spring, parched by August. Tom always said there had to be a solution. Was he the reader? Both of us were. Are. He corrected himself automatically. But Tom was the one who believed books had all the answers. Said everything someone needed to know. Someone else had written down somewhere. Do you believe that? Eli considered. I believe in trying. Tom would have figured out the irrigation eventually. He had a mind for solving things. A pause. So do you. I think. The observation caught her off guard. I just do what needs doing. That's what I mean. He marked his place, set the book aside. Most people see what needs doing. Fewer actually do it. Fewer still do it without being asked. Clara didn't know what to say to that. Compliments in her experience came with expectations, with hooks designed to pull you closer to what someone wanted from you. But Eli's words just sat there, simple and true, asking nothing in return. I should check the horses before bed, she said, needing movement, needing space to think. I'll bank the fire. She wrapped her shawl tight and stepped into the snowy night. The world was quiet the way only winter could make it, muffled and close and somehow infinite. In the barn, the horses dozed standing, peaceful in their stalls. Penny's hoof showed no swelling, the poultice doing its work. Clara stood in the warm darkness, surrounded by the simple sounds of animals at rest, and let herself imagine staying. Not forever, she'd learned better than to think in forevers, but through winter, maybe through spring, long enough to see the lower field flood and maybe help solve it, long enough to watch Penny's trust bloom into something deeper, long enough to mend all of Eli's clothes properly and teach him how to do it himself, long enough to remember who she'd been before she'd learned to run. Tomorrow would bring town and all its dangers, but tonight she had work-roughened hands that knew their worth, a warm barn that felt almost like home, and a quiet man who saw her without trying to own what he saw. Clara picked up needle and thread, settling in to hem the dress she'd wear tomorrow. Her hands told her story. Her mother had said, maybe it was time to let that story be about more than just leaving. The ranch dog found Clara first. She'd noticed him before a brown and white shepherd mix who shadowed Eli's steps when he worked outside, curled by the kitchen door when snow drove them all indoors. But the dog had kept his distance from her, watchful and wary as she went about her work. That changed on a morning when ice turned the yard treacherous as glass. Clara stepped out of the barn carrying water buckets, her new boots purchased in town the week before, finding good grip on the frozen ground. She'd made it halfway to the well when she heard the skitter of paws on ice, a yelp of distress. The dog had ventured onto the frozen water trough, chasing something, a bird, maybe, or just the joy of morning. Now he couldn't find purchase, legs splaying as he slid toward the edge where a fall meant injury on the stone lip. Clara set down her buckets, moving carefully. Easy, boy, easy now. The dog's eyes rolled white with panic, but he stilled at her voice. Clara inched closer, mindful of her own footing, speaking low and steady the way she did with spooked horses. Just need to get you safe, that's all. Nothing to fear. When she was close enough, she sat on the ice, knowing her weight would anchor better than standing. The cold bit through her skirts, but she ignored it, focusing on the frightened animal. Slowly, carefully, she extended her hand. The dog whined, but didn't snap as she grasped his collar. Using her seated position for leverage, she pulled him toward her, away from the edge. His paws scrabbled for purchase, found her lap, and suddenly she had a lapful of shaking dog, pressing against her as if she were the only solid thing in a sliding world. There now, you're all right. She stroked his ears, feeling him slowly relax. More pride than sense. Aren't you know someone else like that? Bear doesn't usually take to strangers. She looked up to find Eli watching from the kitchen doorway, coffee cup steaming in the morning air. Something in his expression made her heart skip not alarm, but awareness of being seen in an unguarded moment. Bear, she kept petting the dog, who showed no signs of moving. Odd name for a dog. Tom named him. Said he looked like a small bear as a pup. Eli stepped out, moving carefully on the ice. Hasn't let anyone but me touch him since Tom died. The weight of that settled over her. The dog bear had chosen to trust her with his fear. Animals always knew, somehow, who was safe. Just happened to be close when he needed help. Clara said, "That's so." Eli crouched beside them, and Bear's tail thumped once against Clara's leg. "Must be why he's been following you for the past 3 days. Then, coincidence." Clara hadn't noticed, focused on her work, on maintaining proper distance, but now that he mentioned it, she remembered glimpses Bear watching from doorways, sitting near the barn when she worked, gradually closing the space between wariness and want. "Following me. Like I said, he doesn't usually—" Eli stopped, shook his head. "Well, seems he's decided something." Bear proved the point by firmly planting himself against Clara's side when she tried to stand, leaning his considerable weight into her as if to say she wasn't going anywhere without him. She had to laugh. It bubbled up unexpected, rusty from disuse but real. "I think you're stuck with him now," Eli said, and there was something in his voice, warmth, maybe, or surprise at her laughter. "He's stubborn when he makes up his mind. Can't imagine where he learned that." The words came out softer than she'd meant, carrying meanings she hadn't intended to share. Eli's eyes met hers, held for a moment that stretched like taffy. Then Bear shoved his head under her hand, demanding attention, and the moment broke. "Come on, then." Clara stood, the dog immediately gluing himself to her side. "If you're shadowing me, might as well be useful. You any good with horses?" Bear's answer was to trot beside her to the barn, tail high, as if he'd been waiting for an invitation all along. From that morning on, Clara had a constant companion. Bear followed her through her daily rounds, learned to stay clear of horse hooves but close enough to offer moral support. He slept outside her door in the barn, a guardian she hadn't asked for but found herself grateful to have. "He's sleeping better," Eli mentioned one evening as they brought the horses in. "Used to pace at night, whining at shadows. Not anymore." Clara watched Bear investigate a mouse hole with intense concentration. Maybe he just needed something to look after. Maybe he did. She felt Eli's gaze on her, but didn't meet it. These moments were coming more frequently, weighted pauses, looks that lingered, an awareness that hummed between them like telegraph wire. It scared her more than winter storms or empty roads. Those she knew how to survive. This, whatever this was, had no map, no clear escape route. The next test came unexpectedly. Clara was in the feed room, measuring grain when her foot slipped on loose straw. She went down hard, barrels tumbling, and suddenly Eli was there, pulling her clear of falling weight. "You hurt." His hands ran over her arms, checking for injury, all practical concern. "No, Her words died as she realized how close they were, her back against his chest, his arms still around her from pulling her to safety. She could feel his heartbeat, quick as her own, could smell leather and wood smoke and something uniquely him. Neither of them moved. Clara. Her name was a question, a warning, a possibility. She turned in his arms, looked up at him, and for one suspended moment, she thought, but no, his hands dropped. He stepped back, giving her space, giving her choice. "You scared me," he said simply. "Scared myself." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Thank you." "Don't thank me for—" He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "Just be careful, please." The please undid her. When was the last time anyone had said please to her, asked instead of demanded? She nodded, not trusting her voice, and fled to the safety of the horses, Bear at her heels. That night, she lay awake thinking of those seconds in his arms. Not with fear, she knew what fear felt like, had lived with it so long it had its own room in her chest. This was different. This was possibility. And possibility was terrifying in its own way, because it asked her to want things, and wanting had always led to loss. 2 days later, Eli brought out an old coat of Tom's. "Yours is too thin for this weather," he said, offering it like he offered everything simply, without ceremony. "This one's just taking up space." The coat was wool, lined with flannel, sturdy enough to last decades. It smelled of cedar and storage, but underneath Clara caught something else, youth. Maybe, or dreams cut short. Tom's coat. "I can't let you freeze for pride's sake. Tom wouldn't like it." Eli set the coat on the barn bench. "Try it. If it fits, it's yours." It fit like it had been made for her, the shoulders broad enough, the length right for her height. Clara had spent years folding herself smaller, hunching to hide her size. The coat didn't ask her to be less than she was. "How do I look?" She meant it as a light question, but it came out vulnerable. Eli studied her, and that look was back the one that saw too much, understood too much. "Like you belong here." The words hung between them, weighted with meanings neither was ready to examine. Clara pulled the coat closer, armor against more than cold. "Thank you," she managed. "Tom would be glad it's being used." He turned to go, paused. "Suits you. The color." Then he was gone, leaving her warm in a dead man's coat, feeling more alive than she had in years. The dance between them continued through the deepening winter. Small moments, fingers brushing as they passed tools, standing too close at the stove. Conversations that dipped below surface into something deeper, always pulling back before the current could catch them, always maintaining the careful balance that kept this arrangement safe. But safety was an illusion. Clara was learning, because every day she stayed, she put down roots she'd sworn never to grow again. Every kindness Eli showed her, every moment of being seen without being possessed, made leaving harder to imagine. And Bear made it impossible, because the dog had decided she was his person, and dogs didn't understand running. They only understood belonging, loyalty, the simple truth of staying where you were loved. One evening, a blizzard howling outside. Clara found herself in the kitchen again. It had become habit checking the horses, then accepting Eli's offer of tea, sitting by the fire while storm winds rattled windows. Safe, domestic, dangerous. "Read something today," Eli said, surprising her. He rarely initiated conversation beyond the practical. "About irrigation. Might have an answer for the lower field." She listened as he explained the concept channels and gates, working with water instead of against it. His face lit up as he talked, animated in a way she rarely saw. This was who he might have been. She realized, if grief hadn't taught him to hold himself apart. Still could be, maybe, with the right reason to try. Tom would have loved this. He finished, then caught himself. "Sorry, I don't mean to always—" "Don't apologize." Clara set down her tea, chose honesty. "You loved your brother. That's nothing to be sorry for." "Some people find it tiresome, the way I can't seem to let him go. Some people are fools." The fierce protectiveness in her voice surprised them both. Eli looked at her, really looked at her, and something shifted in the air between them. "Clara." Bear chose that moment to demand entry, scratching at the door with increasing urgency. The spell broke. Eli let the dog in, and Bear immediately plastered himself to Clara's side, muddy paws and all. "Et tu, Bear?" Eli asked dryly. Clara buried her fingers in Bear's ruff, grounding herself in the simple reality of dog fur and unconditional acceptance. "He just knows where the soft touch lives." "That he does." Eli's voice was gentle, carrying meanings that had nothing to do with dogs. She stood too quickly, Bear scrambling to follow. "I should the horses." "Are fine. Checked them an hour ago." But Eli didn't push, just watched her gather herself to leave. "Clara, you scared me the other day, but not how you think." She paused at the door, not turning. "How then?" "Scared me how much I wanted to not let go." The words followed her into the storm, burrowed under her skin, made a home next to her heart, because she'd felt it too, that moment of rightness, of fit, of finding something she hadn't known she was looking for. But wanting had always cost too much, and Eli Kerrigan, with his quiet strength and careful kindness, his grief and his growth, his way of seeing her without trying to own her, he could cost her everything. Because leaving something you wanted was harder than leaving something you'd never let yourself have. In the barn, Bear curled against her side, and Clara let herself imagine staying, through spring floods and summer droughts, through harvest and planting, through all the seasons of a life built on something more than running. Just imagine. Nothing more. But imagination, like possibility, had its own dangers. Because once you'd seen how something could be, empty roads and cold mornings looked different, less like freedom, more like loss. The evening started like any other. Clara had spent the day helping Eli repair fence posts damaged by the last storm, their breath clouding in the cold air as they worked in companionable rhythm. Bear supervised from a safe distance, occasionally barking at ravens who dared perch too close to his territory. By sunset, her muscles ached pleasantly from honest work. She'd learned the satisfaction of seeing immediate results: a straight fence line, secure posts that would hold through winter's worst, so different from the endless, thankless labor of her stepfather's house. "That should hold," Eli said, testing the last post. "Good work today." "Felt good to be useful." The words came without thought, too honest. He glanced at her, something soft in his expression. "You're always useful, Clara. Don't know how I managed before you came." The weight of that settled between them. Before was becoming a foreign country, a place neither seemed eager to revisit, but the future that remained uncharted, unmapped, too full of possibility to examine closely. They walked back to the buildings together, Bear ranging ahead, and Clara felt the strange comfort of routine. She knew Eli would check the horses while she started dinner, knew he'd bring fresh water from the well without being asked, knew they'd eat together in the warm kitchen, conversation flowing easier now, though still careful around certain edges. What she didn't know was how much longer she could pretend this was temporary. After dinner, Clara worked on mending by the fire while Eli studied his books. It had become their pattern sharing space without demands, letting silence be comfortable. Bear dozed between them, paws twitching with dreams of summer rabbits. "Found something today," Eli said suddenly. He rose, disappeared into the next room, returned with something wrapped in brown paper. "Was going through Tom's things. Thought you might." "Well." He handed her the package, awkward in a way that made her chest tight. Inside was fabric good wool, deep blue like winter twilight, enough for a dress. "I can't accept this." Even as she spoke, her fingers traced the material, feeling its quality. "It's been sitting in a trunk for 3 years. Bought it for..." He paused, cleared his throat. "Tom was courting the school teacher in Cedar Falls. Wanted to give her something nice for Christmas. Never got the chance." Clara understood. Tom had died before Christmas, before chances, before so many things. "Eli, it should be used, made into something. You could use a dress that isn't..." He gestured vaguely at her patched calico. "That isn't held together by stubbornness." Despite everything, she almost smiled. Nothing wrong with stubbornness. "No, but there's something to be said for having choices, too." He sat back down, not looking at her directly. "Keep it, make something. Tom would like knowing it went to good use." Clara held the fabric, feeling its weight. Such a simple gift, but it carried so much trust, care, the slow opening of grief's closed fist. "Thank you." They sat quietly after that, but the air felt different, charged with something unnamed but present, like lightning before it struck. "I've been thinking," Clara said finally, "about what you're owed. For all this..." Eli's head came up sharp. "You're not, we agreed. Room and board for work, fair trade." "No." She set aside the fabric, chose her words carefully. What you're owed for seeing me as person first, woman second, for never asking what I'm running from. For, she gestured at the room, the fire, Bear's sleeping form, for giving me space to remember who I am when I'm not afraid. The silence stretched taut. When Eli spoke, his voice was rough. You don't owe me anything for basic decency, Clara. That's just it. She looked at him directly, letting him see what it cost her. It shouldn't be rare, but it is, and I'm grateful. Something shifted in his expression recognition, maybe of burdens carried too long. Clara. But she was already standing, suddenly needing distance from the intensity of the moment. I should say goodnight. Penny's been restless. Want to check on her. It wasn't quite a lie. Penny had been pawing her stall earlier, but Eli knew retreat when he saw it, and he let her go without question. Another kindness in a long line of them. Clara made it 3 steps from the kitchen door before the world tilted. Ice, hidden under fresh snow, slick as glass, sending her feet in different directions. She felt herself falling, had time to think this will hurt. Strong arms caught her, pulled her against solid warmth. Eli, who must have followed to make sure she made it safe across the yard. Eli, whose heart hammered against her back, whose breath came quick as her own. I've got you. Quiet words against her hair. You're safe. Safe. Such a small word for what she felt in that moment. Safe and seen and held without being trapped. Her hands covered his where they wrapped around her waist, and she let herself lean back, just for a moment, just to know what it felt like. Clara! Her name was prayer and question and warning all at once. She turned in his arms, looked up at him in the moonlight, saw her own want reflected in his careful eyes. I'm tired of being afraid. Of me. No. The truth of it sang through her. Never of you. Of this. Of wanting something I can't keep. His hand came up, touched her face with impossible gentleness. Who says you can't keep it? She had a dozen answers her past. Her stepfather, Harold Briggs, the law that gave men ownership of women who weren't careful, but standing there in Eli's arms. Those reasons felt distant as stars. Here there was only truth, a good man who saw her clearly, who offered without taking, who'd given her space to remember she was worth more than survival. Eli? Just his name, but it carried everything. He understood. She saw it in the way his eyes closed, the way he drew a breath like a man preparing to dive deep. Then he lowered his head, gave her time to pull away, to run. She didn't run. The kiss was careful, tentative. 2 people who'd forgotten how to want testing if they remembered how to have. Clara's hands found his shoulders, solid and real. His arms tightened around her, and she felt something in her chest crack open, not breaking, but thawing. Spring come early to frozen ground. When they parted, her eyes burned with tears she wouldn't shed, not from sorrow, from the terrible sweetness of being held like something precious, kissed like something wanted but not owned. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For waiting for me to be ready, for, she struggled for words, for letting me choose. He pressed his forehead to hers, and they stood that way, breathing the same air, while snow began to fall around them. Clara, I need you to know I don't expect this doesn't change our arrangement unless you want it to. She almost laughed, but it would have come out broken. This good man, still trying to give her exits, even as he held her close. What if I wanted to? Then we figure it out, together, slow as you need. Together, the word hung between them, bright with promise and terrifying in its simplicity. Clara had been alone so long, had built her safety on needing no one. But standing in Eli's arms, she glimpsed another way, not dependence, but partnership, not ownership, but choosing each day to stay. Bear's bark broke the moment. He stood in the barn doorway, clearly affronted by their absence. Clara laughed real laughter, rusty but true. Someone's impatient. Someone spoiled. But Eli smiled, the expression transforming his face. Walk you to the barn properly this time. She took his offered arm, formal as any town lady, and they made their careful way across the ice. At the barn door, she turned back. This doesn't solve everything. My past. We'll keep till you're ready to share it, or not. Your choice. He touched her face again, brief but tender. I'm a patient man, Clara, and you're worth waiting for. The words followed her into the barn, wrapped around her like summer warmth. Bear pressed against her legs, demanding attention and treats, and she gave both gladly, but her mind stayed on those moments in Eli's arms, the careful kiss that asked for nothing but offered everything. She'd kissed him from gratitude. That had been the plan, the reason, the safe explanation. But gratitude didn't explain the fire in her chest, the way her lips still tingled, the dangerous hope blooming despite every lesson that had taught her better. Clara pulled out the blue fabric, spread it on her small table. By lamplight, it looked like deep water, like evening sky, like possibility given form. She'd make a dress not fancy, nothing that pretended to be more than what she was, but something whole, something hers, something chosen rather than required. Bear curled at her feet as she began to plan, sketching rough patterns on brown paper. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in temporary peace. Tomorrow would bring questions, fears, the weight of past and future pressing close. But tonight, she'd been kissed by a good man under winter stars. Tonight, she'd chosen to stay present in that kiss rather than run. Tonight, she had blue fabric and brown paper and a sleeping dog who'd decided she belonged. It was enough, more than enough. It was beginning. Dawn came gray and uncertain, matching Clara's mood. She'd barely slept, replaying the kiss, the warmth of Eli's arms, the dangerous sweetness of being held. Her lips still remembered the careful pressure of his. Her body still carried the imprint of safety that had nothing to do with shelter from storms. She rose before first light, needing the familiar routine of morning chores to steady herself. Bear followed, yawning but loyal, as she made her way to the barn. The horses greeted her with soft nickering, and she lost herself in the rhythm of feeding, watering, checking hooves and coats. Morning. Eli's voice made her jump. He stood in the barn doorway, 2 cups of coffee steaming in the cold air, looking as uncertain as she felt. Morning. She took the offered cup, careful not to let their fingers touch. Sleep well? No. Simple honesty, like everything about him. You? No. They stood there, sipping coffee, letting the silence stretch. Not uncomfortable exactly, but weighted with everything unspoken. Finally, Eli cleared his throat. Clara, about last night. I meant it. The words rushed out before she could stop them. The kiss. I meant it. His shoulders relaxed slightly. Good. So did I, but it changes things. She made herself meet his eyes. I know. I've been thinking about that all night. And she took a breath, chose truth. I don't know how to do this, be with someone without losing myself. The last time I tried, she shook her head. No, I never tried. It was chosen for me, and I ran rather than let it happen. Understanding dawned in his expression. The man you were supposed to marry. Not a question, but she nodded anyway. Harold Briggs, 43 years old, owned the neighboring ranch. My stepfather owed him money. I was payment. Eli's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. He'd come by the house, watch me, make comments about how a tall woman like me would breed strong sons. The words tasted bitter. Said I should be grateful, a plain woman past 20. I was lucky anyone wanted me. Clara, I'm not telling you this for pity. She kept her voice steady. I'm telling you so you understand. When I ran, I swore I'd never let anyone own me again. Never be someone's property, someone's payment, someone's anything but my own. Eli set down his coffee cup, moved closer but didn't touch. I don't want to own you, Clara. I know. And she did. Had known from that first night when he'd given her shelter without conditions. That's what scares me, because you make me want to stay, and wanting has always been dangerous. It doesn't have to be. His voice was quiet, certain. Not all wanting leads to cages. Sometimes it just leads to choosing. She looked at him then, this careful man who'd lost so much but still had tenderness to offer. Is that what this is, a choice? Every day. He did touch her then, just her hand, his fingers warm against her cold ones. You choose to stay or go. I choose to ask nothing you're not ready to give. We choose to see what grows between us, or we choose to keep things as they were. And if I choose wrong, there's no wrong, there's just what we decide, one day at a time. The simplicity of it made her chest tight. No promises of forever, no demands for commitment she couldn't give. Just choice, renewed daily, like feeding horses or mending fences. Work you did because it needed doing, because it mattered. I'd like to try, she said softly. But slowly, carefully. I need time, space, the freedom to run if you need to. He squeezed her hand gently. I know, and you'll have it. She believed him. That was the miracle of it, she actually believed him. They worked through the morning with a new awareness between them. Small things shifted Eli's hand on her back as they moved around each other in the barn. Clara letting herself lean into him when they stood at Penny's stall, discussing her progress. Not much, just enough to acknowledge what they'd started. After lunch, Eli had business in town, leaving Clara to her usual routines. She was in the kitchen, working on the blue dress, when she heard riders approaching, multiple horses moving fast. Bear growled, hackles rising. Through the window, she saw 3 men dismounting in the yard. Her blood turned to ice as she recognized the lead rider, not her stepfather, but worse, Harold Briggs himself. Flanked by 2 men she didn't know. Hard men, the kind money bought when you needed dirty work done. Clara's hands shook as she set aside the sewing. She'd known this day would come, had thought she'd have more time, more warning, but life rarely gave you what you thought you needed. She stepped onto the porch, Bear pressed against her legs, growling low and continuous. Miss Dane? Briggs touched his hat, mockery in the gesture. Been looking for you. I'm not lost. He smiled, the expression making her skin crawl. Your father disagrees. Seems you left without proper goodbye, without fulfilling certain obligations. My stepfather, and I owe him nothing. Law says different. Briggs dismounted, handed his reins to one of his men. You're an unmarried woman, under your father's authority. He's agreed you should come home. With me. No. The word hung between them, sharp as winter wind. Briggs's smile faded. Wasn't a request, girl. You've led us a merry chase, but it's over. Get your things. The lady said no. Eli's voice came from behind her. She hadn't heard him return, but there he stood, rifle casual in his hands. Not pointed at anyone. Yet. Briggs's eyes narrowed. This you're doing, Kerrigan. You harboring runaway women now. I'm employing a woman who needed work. Nothing illegal in that. Is if she's promised to me. Briggs stepped forward. Bear's growl deepened. Her father and I have an understanding. Then you and her stepfather can keep your understanding. Doesn't involve Miss Dane unless she chooses it. Eli's voice stayed calm, but Clara heard steel beneath, and she's chosen otherwise. One of Briggs's men shifted, hand moving toward his gun. Eli's rifle swung that direction, still not quite threatening, still not quite, not. Careful, Eli said quietly. Man makes sudden moves around nervous horses, might spook them, might cause all sorts of unfortunate accidents. The moment stretched taut. Clara felt it balanced on a knife's edge, violence or retreat, blood or backing down. Then Briggs laughed, ugly and knowing. You sweet on her. Kerrigan, that it well. Can't say I blame you. She's a fine piece of woman, even if she does need breaking to bridle. He looked Clara up and down, possessive and dismissive at once. Tell you what, I'll make you a deal. Whatever her father owes you for her keep, I'll pay double. Fair. She's not for sale. The steel was clearer now in Eli's voice. Everything's for sale, just matter of price. Briggs's smile returned. But maybe you already collected payment, that why you're so protective. Well, I'm not unreasonable. Used goods are still goods. I'll take her anyway. The rifle did swing up then, pointed dead center at Briggs's chest. Get off my land. Now, no need for... Get off my land. Each word came separate, distinct, final. And don't come back. Miss Dane works for me. She's under my protection. Anyone thinks different can take it up with me. Personal. Briggs studied him for a long moment. Clara saw him weighing options 3 men against 1. But Eli had the rifle and the high ground. More. He had the certainty of a man defending something that mattered. That showed in every line of his body. This isn't over, Briggs said finally. Girl's got family, got obligations. Law's on my side. Maybe, but law's in town, and we're here. Eli's aim never wavered. Your choice how you want to leave, vertical or horizontal, makes no difference to me. Another stretched moment. Then Briggs stepped back, gestured to his men. We'll be back, with the sheriff, with papers, legal and binding. You do that. Eli watched them mount, watched them wheel their horses. But Briggs, you set foot on my land again without that sheriff. I'll assume you're here to cause trouble. Act according. The threat hung in the air as the men rode away. Clara stayed frozen until they disappeared over the ridge. Then her knees gave out. She sank onto the porch steps, Bear immediately shoving his head into her lap. Eli set the rifle aside, crouched in front of her. You all right? You shouldn't have. He'll be back, with more men. With... Her voice broke. I've brought trouble to your door. I should go, tonight, before... Clara. He took her hands, held them firm. Look at me. She did, seeing her own fear reflected in his winter eyes. You think I didn't know this might come? Think I didn't guess you were running from something like this? He squeezed her hands. I made my choice, same as you made yours last night. I'm not backing away from it now. But if they come back, then we deal with it, together. His thumb stroked over her knuckles. Unless you want to run, that's still your choice. Always will be. But you should know I'd rather fight beside you than watch you disappear. The words undid her. She pulled her hands free only to frame his face, to kiss him fierce and grateful and terrified all at once. He answered in kind, pulling her close. And for a moment the world narrowed to just this 2 people choosing each other despite the cost. When they parted, Clara's fear had transmuted into something harder, more useful. He won't give up. His pride won't let him. I know. Eli helped her stand. We'll be ready. Did you think I'd face this alone? He touched her cheek, gentle despite the steel she'd seen in him moments before. We're partners. Clara, in work, in this, in whatever comes. Partners. The word settled into her chest, found a home next to her heart. She'd been alone so long, had thought safety lived only in solitude. But standing there with Eli, with Bear pressed loyal against their legs, she glimpsed another truth. Sometimes safety came from standing together. Sometimes strength grew from admitting you needed someone else's. All right, she said. Partners. He smiled then, quick and fierce. Good. Now let's get ready. We've got work to do. They spent the afternoon preparing checking weapons, securing the buildings, making plans for different scenarios. Clara found herself steadying as they worked. This was just another kind of labor, Another problem to solve with hands and will and stubborn determination. As evening fell, she stood at the kitchen window, watching the ridge where trouble would come from. Eli moved behind her, arms coming around her waist, and she leaned back into his strength. "Scared?" he asked. "Yes, but not of what you think." She turned in his arms. "I'm scared of how much I want this, want you, want the life we could build if they'd let us. Then we fight for it. Simple as that, like everything about him. Whatever it takes." She kissed him then, soft and sure, tasting promise on his lips. Whatever came tomorrow, sheriffs or shootings, law or lawlessness, tonight she had this: a good man's arms, a loyal dog at her feet, a choice made freely, defended fiercely. It was more than she'd ever thought to have. It was worth fighting for. They came at first light 3 days later, not Briggs and hired guns, but worse. Clara's stepfather, Walter Dane, rode at the head of a small procession that included Sheriff Morrison, Harold Briggs, and 2 other men she recognized from town. The veneer of legality made them more dangerous than any midnight raid. Clara watched from the window as they approached, her hands steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. She dressed carefully in her good calico, hair pinned neat, presenting the image of a respectable woman rather than a runaway daughter. Appearances mattered when the law got involved. "They're here," she said quietly. Eli looked up from loading his rifle. "I see them. Remember what we discussed?" "Let you do the talking. Stay calm. Don't give them reason to claim I'm hysterical or unfit to make my own choices. You'll be fine." He set the rifle aside, came to stand beside her. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Bear paced between them and the door, hackles raised, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He knew threat when he smelled it. The knock, when it came, sounded like judgment. Eli opened the door, blocking it with his body. "Sheriff, gentlemen." Kerrigan. Sheriff Morrison touched his hat, looking uncomfortable. He was a fair man, Clara knew, but bound by law and the influence of men like Briggs. "Need to speak with Miss Dane. Her father's made some serious claims." "Stepfather," Clara said, moving to stand beside Eli. "My father died when I was 8. Walter Dane pushed forward, face red with anger and morning whiskey. "Don't you start with your corrections. Girl, I raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head. That makes me your father in the eyes of the law." Mr. Dane." The sheriff held up a hand. "Let me handle this. Miss Dane, your stepfather says you left home without permission. Says you took things that weren't yours. Says you had an understanding with Mr. Briggs here about marriage." "I left because I'm a grown woman with the right to make my own way," Clara said, keeping her voice level. "I took nothing but my own clothes and what little money I'd saved from taking and mending. And any understanding was between Mr. Dane and Mr. Briggs. I was never consulted." "She was told plain what was expected," Walter snarled. "Ungrateful girl refused a good match. Embarrassed me in front of the whole county. Now she's living in sin with Kerrigan here." "Careful." Eli's voice carried warning. "Miss Dane works for me. Properly. She lives in the barn, not the house. Nothing improper about it." Sheriff Morrison looked between them, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. "That true, Miss Dane? You're employed here?" "Yes, sir, Mr. Kerrigan pays me a fair wage for tending his horses. I have my own quarters in the barn." "She's lying." Briggs spoke for the first time, voice oily with false concern. "Poor girl's been turned from her proper path. Kerrigan's clearly taken advantage of her desperate state. As her intended husband, I'm willing to overlook this unfortunate chapter." "You're not my intended anything," Clara said sharply. "I never agreed to marry you, never wanted to marry you. I'm not property to be sold for my stepfather's debts." "Now see here," Walter started forward, but Bear stepped between them, teeth bared. "Control your animal," the sheriff said. "He's protective of Miss Dane," Eli said mildly. Seems to know when she's being threatened. No one's threatening anyone. Sheriff Morrison rubbed his face, looking tired. Look, here's the situation plain. Miss Dane, you're an unmarried woman. Law says you're under your father's stepfather's authority until you marry. He wants you to come home. Says it's for your own good. My own good? Clara laughed, bitter. Sheriff, you know what kind of man Walter Dane is. How many times have you been called to his place for drunk and disorderly? How many times have the neighbors complained about the screaming from his house? Walter's face went darker. You watch your tongue, girl. Or what you'll beat me like you did when I lived under your roof, like you did my mother until she died worn out at 35. Clara felt Eli's hand on her arm, steadying, but she couldn't stop now. Tell the sheriff about my mother, Walter. Tell him how she looked the day she died. Your mother was delicate, weak. Not my fault she couldn't handle farm life. She was strong until you broke her down. Clara turned to the sheriff. I'm not going back. I'm 23 years old, employed, supporting myself. I've broken no laws. Except theft, Briggs said smoothly. And breach of promise. Her father's stepfather and I had an agreement. Money changed hands. Then that's between you and him, Eli said. Has nothing to do with Miss Dane. The sheriff looked increasingly uncomfortable. Miss Dane, I'm going to have to ask you to come to town. Let the judge sort this out. No. Clara stepped back, and Bear moved with her, placing himself firmly between her and the men. I won't go anywhere with them. Now, miss, don't make this difficult. The lady doesn't want to go. Eli's hand moved to his sidearm, casual but clear. Seems to me that settles it. Kerrigan, don't make this worse, the sheriff warned. I've got a job to do. Your job is to uphold the law. Show me the law that says a grown woman can be dragged from her place of employment because her stepfather sold her to pay his drinking debts. She's my daughter, Walter shouted. Mine to do with as I see fit. Is that so? Eli's voice went dangerously quiet. Your daughter, or your property. Because last I checked, we fought a war about owning people. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Briggs spoke, voice hard. You comparing a father's rights to slavery, Kerrigan? I'm comparing treating a woman like goods to be sold to what it is wrong. High words from a man who's bedding her, Walter spat. Eli moved then, fast as lightning. But Clara was faster. She caught his arm before he could do something they'd all regret. No, she said quietly. That's what they want. Don't give it to them. He stopped, but she felt the tension humming through him. Violence barely leashed. Nobody talks about you that way. Let them talk. She turned to face the men, chin high. Sheriff Morrison, I'll ask you plain. What happens if I refuse to go? The sheriff shifted uncomfortably. Well, your stepfather could press charges. Theft, like Mr. Briggs said, running away from lawful authority. Judge might not look kindly on it. And if I go, you go home where you belong, Walter said. Marry Briggs like you should have months ago. Be a proper daughter for once in your life. Clara felt something harden in her chest, cold and sure as winter iron. I'll go to town, Sheriff, but not with them. I'll come on my own, with Mr. Kerrigan as my escort. I'll tell my side to the judge. All of it. Every bruise, every broken dish thrown in anger. Every time my mother begged for mercy and got none. Walter's face went white, then red. You lying little... Am I lying? Clara stared him down. Want me to show the judge the scars? Want me to tell him about the time you broke Tom's arm because he spilled milk? About how Mary still won't speak above a whisper because you told her girls who talk back get the strap? Those are family matters. Private. Not anymore. Clara felt Eli's solid presence at her back, Bear's warmth at her side, and found strength in both. You want to involve the law, fine, but I'll speak my piece. Let the whole town know what kind of man Walter Dane is. What kind of father sells his daughter to cover bar tabs? Briggs grabbed Walter's arm before he could lunge forward. This is getting us nowhere. Sheriff, do your job. Bring her in. Sheriff Morrison looked at Clara, at Eli, at the situation spiraling beyond his control. Miss Dane, will you give me your word you'll come to town tomorrow? Peacefully let the judge hear both sides. You have my word, Clara said, but I won't go with them, and I won't go unarmed. The sheriff nodded slowly. Fair enough. Tomorrow, noon, courthouse. Don't make me come looking for you. We'll be there, Eli said. The men mounted their horses, Walter cursing under his breath, Briggs watching Clara with eyes that promised this wasn't over. As they rode away, Clara's knees finally gave out. She sank onto the porch steps, shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. You did good, Eli said, sitting beside her. Stood your ground. For now. She leaned into him. Let his arm come around her. Tomorrow's another fight. Then we'll face it tomorrow. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Clara, what you said about your family. All true, every word. She closed her eyes. I protected the young ones best I could, but I couldn't save them all, couldn't save my mother. That's why I ran. Eli, not just to save myself, but because I couldn't watch him destroy anything else I loved. His arm tightened around her. You're not going back there. Whatever it takes, whatever we have to do, you're not going back. The law. There's law, and there's right. They're not always the same thing. He turned her to face him. I meant what I said. You're under my protection. That's not just words. I know. She touched his face. This good man who'd stand between her and the world if needed. But I won't let you throw your life away for me. If the judge rules against us, then we deal with it, together, like we promised. He caught her hand, held it firm. Clara, I need you to understand something. You're not some duty I've taken on. You're not a cause or a principle. You're the woman He stopped, swallowed. The woman I'm choosing, every day, whatever comes. The words broke something open in her chest. She kissed him then, fierce and desperate and grateful, pouring everything she couldn't say into the contact. When they parted, both breathing hard, she managed a shaky smile. We should prepare for tomorrow. We should, but he didn't move, just held her close. Clara, whatever happens, I'm glad you stayed. Glad you're here. Glad I get to stand beside you. Even if it costs you everything. Everything I had before you came was just existing. This is living. He stood, pulled her up with him. Come on, let's get ready to fight for that life. They spent the rest of the day preparing arguments, gathering what documents Clara had, planning for different outcomes. But under it all was the knowledge that tomorrow would bring a reckoning. The law might not be on their side. Money and influence rarely favored those without either. But as Clara worked beside Eli, as Bear stayed close as a shadow, she felt something she hadn't expected: hope. Not for easy victory, but for the chance to speak truth, to stand in public and name what had been done to her and her family, to refuse to be silent or ashamed or small. Tomorrow she'd face her stepfather and Harold Briggs and the weight of law that saw her as property. But she wouldn't face them alone. She had a good man beside her, a loyal dog at her feet, and her own voice ready to speak. It would have to be enough. The Promise Creek Courthouse stood solid and imposing, red brick darkened by years of weather. Clara had passed it many times during her weeks in town, but never imagined she'd stand inside, fighting for her freedom before a room full of strangers. She wore the blue dress finished in haste the night before, Eli helping with the hem while she sewed on buttons. It wasn't fancy, but it was new and neat and entirely hers, armor of a different sort. Ready? Eli asked as they climbed the courthouse steps. No, but she climbed anyway, Bear padding beside them until a bailiff stopped them at the door. No dogs in the courthouse. He stays with me, Clara said firmly. The bailiff looked ready to argue, but Eli stepped forward. The dog is evidence, sir. Part of our case. It was a stretch, but the bailiff, clearly wanting to avoid trouble before the proceedings even began, waved them through. The courtroom was already half full. Word traveled fast in a small town, and a scandal involving the Dane family and Harold Briggs was too good to miss. Clara recognized faces from her trips to town. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house, her expression sharp with judgment. Samuel Chen from the general store, watching with quiet sympathy. Various ranchers and townspeople come for the entertainment. At the front, Walter Dane sat with Briggs and a man in a city suit who must be their lawyer. Walter's face was already flushed, though whether from anger or morning drink, Clara couldn't tell. Miss Dane. A woman's voice made her turn. Mary Stewart, the schoolteacher, stood near the aisle. I wanted you to know several of us are here to support you. What's happening isn't right. Before Clara could respond, the bailiff called for order. Judge Randolph entered, an older man with silver hair and a face that gave nothing away. Clara had heard he was fair but traditional, unlikely to buck convention without good cause. Be seated. The judge reviewed papers before him. This is a hearing regarding the matter of Clara Dane, her legal status, and claims made by Mr. Walter Dane and Mr. Harold Briggs. Miss Dane, do you have representation? Clara stood. No, sir, I'll speak for myself. That's irregular. Mr. Dane, I see you've brought counsel. The city lawyer stood. James Whitfield, Your Honor, representing Mr. Dane and Mr. Briggs in this matter of property recovery and breach of contract. Property recovery? The words made Clara's stomach turn. Very well. The judge looked at Clara. You may sit. Miss Dane, Mr. Whitfield, present your case. The lawyer stood, smooth and polished. Your Honor, this is a simple matter. Miss Dane is an unmarried woman of 23, living under her father's legal guardianship. She left home without permission, taking items belonging to the household. Furthermore, she broke a marriage agreement between Mr. Dane and Mr. Briggs, causing financial damage to both parties. We ask that she be returned to her father's custody immediately. Those are serious charges, the judge said. What items did she allegedly take? Clothing, household money, various personal effects belonging to the family. Clara shot to her feet. My own clothes, money I earned from mending. Miss Dane, you'll have your turn, the judge said. Sit down. She sat, hands clenched in her lap. Eli touched her arm, lightly steady. I'm here. The lawyer continued, painting a picture of an ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned her family duties, stolen from those who'd raised her, and was now living in an improper situation that scandalized decent folk. By the time he finished, Clara sounded like a criminal and worse. Thank you, Mr. Whitfield, the judge said. Miss Dane, you may speak now. Clara stood, legs steadier than she'd expected. The words she'd practiced fled. Instead, truth came pouring out. Your Honor, I'd like to tell you about my mother. Sarah Mills was her name, before she became Sarah Dane. She was 17 when she married Walter Dane, a widow with a young daughter, me. She thought she was getting a father for her child and a partner for life. Miss Dane, I fail to see. Please, Your Honor, it's important. Clara took a breath. My mother bore Walter Dane 6 children in 10 years. By the time she died at 35, she looked 50, worn down by work and childbearing and something else, the constant fear of setting him off. Objection. Whitfield stood. This is hearsay and slander. It's truth, Clara said firmly. I was there. I saw every bruise explained away as clumsiness, every broken dish that somehow always flew at her during arguments. I helped birth those 6 children because we couldn't afford a midwife, and I raised them because my mother was too broken down to do more than survive. The courtroom had gone silent. Even Walter seemed momentarily stunned by her directness. When my mother died, Clara continued, I took over, cooking, cleaning, raising children, working the farm. I was 15 for 8 years. I was unpaid labor in that house. When I started taking in mending to earn money, Walter took that too, said it was household income. You were fed and sheltered, Walter burst out. That's more than many get. Fed what was left after you ate. Sheltered in the same house where you'd rage at shadows when drunk. Clara turned back to the judge. Your Honor, 3 months ago, Walter Dane told me I was to marry Harold Briggs. Not asked, told. When I refused, he said I owed him for my upbringing. Said Briggs would forgive certain debts in exchange for me. That's a lie. Briggs stood. It was a proper arrangement. How much? Clara faced him. How much was I worth? What price did you put on me? Briggs's face flushed. The financial arrangements were $200 and forgiveness of a $300 bar debt. Clara said, I know because I heard you discussing it, like I was livestock at auction. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Judge Randolph banged his gavel. Order! I left because I refused to be sold, Clara continued. I took nothing but clothes I'd made or mended myself, and $17 I'd saved over 2 years from work Walter didn't know about. If that's theft, then every woman who's ever left a bad situation is a thief. And now you're living with a man, Walter shouted, bringing shame on my name. I work for Mr. Kerrigan. Honestly, I tend his horses and keep my own quarters in the barn. Clara lifted her chin. Which is more honorable, earning my own keep or being sold to pay your drinking debts? How dare you? Mr. Dane, control yourself, the judge warned. He studied Clara. These are serious accusations. Miss Dane, can anyone verify your claims? I can. A voice from the back of the room. Clara turned to see a thin woman standing Martha Wade, who'd lived near the Dane farm. Mrs. Wade, the judge acknowledged. You have relevant testimony. I do, Your Honor. Martha moved forward. I was Sarah Dane's friend. I helped birth most of those children when Clara was too young to manage alone. Everything she says is true. Sarah died of exhaustion and despair, and this girl held that family together for 8 years after. Anyone can claim, Whitfield began. I can testify too. Another voice, Robert Mills, the doctor. I treated Mrs. Dane several times for injuries consistent with accidents. I also treated the children. That household was no place for any young woman. More voices rose, neighbors who'd seen, townspeople who'd wondered, people who'd kept quiet because that's what you did with family matters. But Clara's courage in speaking had given them permission to speak too. Enough! Walter slammed his hand on the table. She's my daughter by law, mine to command. Actually, Eli spoke for the first time, standing slowly. There's some question about that. All eyes turned to him. Mr. Kerrigan, the judge prompted. I've been doing some checking, Your Honor, at the county records office. Eli pulled out a paper. According to this, Walter Dane never legally adopted Clara. Her mother married him. Yes, but there's no adoption papers filed. Legally, Clara Mills is not his daughter. The courtroom erupted. Walter lunged to his feet, face purple. She lived in my house, ate my food. As unpaid labor, Eli said calmly, if anything, Mr. Dane, you owe Miss Mills 8 years of wages. This is ridiculous, Briggs stood. Whatever the technicalities, she was promised to me by a man with no legal authority to promise her. Eli countered. Your contract, if one exists, is with Walter Dane. Take it up with him. Judge Randolph banged his gavel repeatedly. Order, I will have order. When the room settled, he looked at Clara. Miss Mills, apparently, do you have anything else to say? Clara stood one more time. Just this, Your Honor. I came to Promise Creek with nothing but hope for honest work and a chance to make my own way. Eli Kerrigan gave me that chance. He gave me shelter without conditions, work with fair pay, and respect I'd never known before. She looked at Walter, at Briggs. These men want to drag me back to a life that was killing me slowly. I'm asking you to let me live free. And this dog, the judge gestured at Bear, who'd stayed pressed against Clara's legs throughout. He chose me, Clara said simply. Animals know who's safe. Your Honor, Bear won't go near Mr. Dane or Mr. Briggs, but he's stayed by my side since he decided I was worth protecting. Sometimes animals are better judges of character than people. As if to prove the point, Bear stood, looked directly at the judge, and wagged his tail once before settling back against Clara. The judge almost smiled. I see. He reviewed his papers, the courtroom holding its breath. Finally. He looked up. Mr. Whitfield, your case rests on Miss Dane being Mr. Dane's legal daughter. She is not. It rests on her taking family property, by multiple testimonies. She took only what was personally hers. It rests on a marriage contract she never signed or agreed to. He removed his spectacles, cleaned them slowly. I find no legal basis to compel Miss Mills to return to Mr. Dane's household or to honor any agreement she didn't make herself. The courtroom exploded again, cheers from some, angry shouts from Walter and Briggs. The judge gavelled for order. However, he continued, and Clara's heart sank. Miss Mills, you are still an unmarried woman living in an unconventional situation. While not illegal, it does raise questions of propriety. Clara felt Eli tense beside her. Therefore, the judge said, I strongly advise you to formalize your employment arrangement with proper contracts and witnesses, and perhaps consider more conventional living arrangements when practical. This court's protection extends only so far. Understood, Your Honor, Clara said. Then this matter is concluded. Miss Mills is free to go where she chooses. Mr. Dane, Mr. Briggs, any attempt to force or coerce her will be met with the full weight of the law. Court dismissed. The gavel fell with finality. Clara stood frozen as chaos erupted around her. Walter cursing, Briggs threatening lawyers from the city, townspeople offering congratulations. Then Eli's hand was on her elbow, guiding her out, Bear clearing a path with his presence. Outside, in the cold, bright air, Clara finally breathed. It's over, she whispered. This part is, Eli agreed. They'll probably try again, but for now, she cut him off with a kiss. There on the courthouse steps in front of half the town. Let them see. Let them talk. She was Clara Mills, free woman, and she'd kiss who she chose. When they parted, Eli was smiling. That'll give them something to gossip about. Good. She took his arm properly, like a lady, like a woman with every right to walk beside the man she'd chosen. Take me home, Eli. We have a life to build. They walked through town together. Clara, Eli, and Bear passed whispers and stares and a few approving nods. The future stretched uncertain before them, but for the first time in her life, Clara faced it as herself, not anyone's property or problem or possession. Just Clara Mills, choosing her own way forward. It was enough. It was everything. It was freedom. The ride back from town was quiet, each lost in thought about what had transpired. Clara felt lighter, as if chains she'd worn so long she'd forgotten their weight had finally fallen away. But she also felt exposed, raw. Speaking her truth in that courtroom had cost her something. Even as it freed her, they were almost to the ranch when Eli spoke. You were brave today. I was terrified. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what needs doing despite the fear. He glanced at her. Your mother would be proud. The words hit unexpected, bringing tears. Clara blinked away. I hope so. I hope she knows I tried to save the children. Even if I couldn't save her, she knows. They rode in silence after that, but it was the comfortable quiet of two people who'd stood together through fire and found themselves stronger for it. Back at the ranch, Clara changed from the blue dress into her work clothes, needing the familiar routine of evening chores to settle her nerves. But as she entered the barn, she stopped short. Someone had been there. Grain sacks moved, tack reorganized, her small living space disturbed. Nothing missing that she could see, but the violation of it made her skin crawl. "Eli?" He came running, took in the scene with sharp eyes. While we were at court, someone's been through everything." She moved to her small trunk, heart sinking. "The money I'd saved, it's gone. $23. Not much to most, but it represented months of small economies, security against uncertain futures. Now gone." "Briggs," Eli's voice was flat. "Or your stepfather, making a point. Showing me I'm not safe, that they can reach me any time." Clara sank onto her cot, suddenly exhausted. "Maybe I should go, before this escalates, before you get hurt because of me." "Clara?" Eli knelt in front of her, took her hands. "Look at me." She did, seeing her own fears reflected in his winter sky eyes. "You think I did all this just to let you run now? Stood in that courtroom, challenged those men, put my reputation on the line because I thought you'd rabbit at the first sign of trouble. Your reputation means nothing compared to what we're building here." His thumb stroked over her knuckles. "They want you to run. Want you scared and alone on the road where they can scoop you up. Claim you went mad or worse. Running is what they're counting on. Then what do? We make it harder for them to play these games." He stood, pulled her up with him. "Starting with moving you into the house." "Eli, hear me out. The judge said to consider more conventional arrangements." "Well, nothing more conventional than a housekeeper living in propriety satisfied, and you're not alone out here where anyone can get at you." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. Living in Eli's house, even as an employee, was a line she hadn't imagined crossing. "People will talk. People are already talking. Might as well be safe while they do it." His expression softened. "Unless you're uncomfortable with the idea. Your choice. Always." She thought about the disturbed barn, the message clear in the violation. Thought about nights alone, jumping at every sound, wondering when they'd come back. Then thought about Eli's solid presence, Bear's loyalty, the safety of walls and witnesses. "All right, but I pay rent from my wages, and we do this proper separate rooms. Clear boundaries." "Of course." But his eyes said he was remembering their kisses, the promises made without words. They spent the evening moving her few possessions into the small room off the kitchen Tom's room once. Kept clean, but unused since his death. Clara tried not to think about that, about stepping into a dead man's space. But when she set her mother's Bible on the nightstand, the room felt less like a shrine and more like a shelter. "It's not much," Eli said from the doorway, careful not to enter uninvited. "It's more than I've had in years." She touched the quilt on the bed, handmade with neat, tiny stitches. "Did Tom make this?" "Our mother did. Sent it when we first came west. Tom always said it made the place feel like home." "And now it's yours." He started to leave, paused. "Clara, for what it's worth, I think Tom would be glad. He always said empty rooms were just wasted space, waiting for the right person to fill them." That night, Clara lay in a real bed in a real room with a door that locked from the inside, Bear curled on the rug beside her, having appointed himself her personal guardian. Through the thin walls, she could hear Eli moving around the kitchen, the normal sounds of evening routine. It felt strange, intimate without being improper, like playing at a life she hadn't dared imagine. The next days fell into new rhythms. Clara rose early to start breakfast, worked with the horses during the day, kept house in the evening. To any observer, she was simply a housekeeper who happened to be skilled with animals. But the truth lived in smaller moments, shared smiles over coffee, fingers brushing as they passed tools, conversations that ran deep into the night by the fire. They were building something neither quite dared name. A week after the court hearing, Clara was in the kitchen kneading bread when she heard horses approaching, her hands stilled on the dough, memory of violation fresh. But it was Mary Stewart, the schoolteacher, accompanied by 2 other women from town. "Miss Mills," Mary said warmly. "We hoped we might speak with you." Clara wiped her hands, gestured them inside, served tea with the grace her mother had taught her before life got hard. The women exchanged glances. Then Mary spoke. "We were impressed by your courage at the courthouse. Speaking truth to power like that, it meant something. To all of us." "Thank you," Clara said carefully, unsure where this was heading. "The thing is," one of the other women, Anna Chen, the storekeeper's wife, said, "you're not the only woman in bad situations, not the only one who's been sold or traded or treated like property instead of a person. What Anna's trying to say," Mary continued, "is that we want to help other women who need what you found: work, safety, the chance to make their own way." Clara set down her teacup slowly. "You want to create some kind of network?" "Exactly. Safe houses, employment opportunities, legal support when possible." Mary leaned forward. "Your case set precedent, showed that women aren't automatically property, that contracts require consent from all parties. We want to build on that." "I'm just one person who got lucky." "No." Anna's voice was firm. "You're one person who stood up, who said, 'I choose differently.' That matters." Clara thought of her mother, worn down to nothing, of her half-siblings, scattered now, some probably repeating the same cycles, of all the women in all the farmhouses, bearing bruises and babies and the weight of being owned. "What do you need from me?" The women smiled. They talked for an hour about plans, possibilities, the quiet revolution of women helping women. When they left, Clara felt something new, not just freed, but purposeful. Her story could help others. Her escape could light the way. Eli found her that evening sitting by the fire, Bear's head in her lap, staring at flames. "Good visit?" he asked, settling beside her. "They want me to help other women, like me, who need out. And I want to, but I'm scared it'll bring more trouble to your door." "Our door," he corrected gently. "And Clara, this house has been too quiet too long. Maybe it's time it stood for something more than just getting by." She looked at him, this man who kept surprising her with his depths. "You mean that my brother believed in justice, in people getting fair chances? He'd be proud to see this house used that way." Eli took her hand, held it careful like something precious. "Besides, seems to me a man's character is measured by what he'll stand for. I'll stand for you, for this, for whatever comes. Even if it costs you. Already told you what I had before wasn't living. This is—" He brought her hand to his lips, kissed it soft. "Clara Mills, you've turned my quiet life upside down, and I'm grateful for it." She leaned into him, let his arm come around her, in the fire's light, with Bear snoring soft and house settling into night sounds. Clara felt something she'd never expected home. Not just shelter, not just safety, but belonging. "Eli," she spoke soft into growing darkness. "The judge was right about one thing. This arrangement, it can't stay like this forever. People will talk more. Your reputation will survive whatever comes." His arm tightened around her. "But you're right. We should think about the future, about what we want, what you want." The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Clara knew what he was edging toward, knew her own heart's answer, but speaking it felt like stepping off a cliff into free fall. "I want to stay," she said finally. "Not just for now, not just until trouble passes. I want to build something here, with you, if you want that too, if you're not just being kind to someone who needed help? He turned her to face him, and in his eyes she saw the truth clear as mountain water. Clara, I've been half alive since Tom died, going through motions, keeping the ranch running because I didn't know what else to do. Then you showed up, proud and scared and so determined to make your own way. You brought life back into this place. Into me. Eli, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give, but I need you to know this isn't charity or kindness or obligation. This is me choosing you, every day, for as long as you'll let me. Clara kissed him then, soft and sure, tasting promise on his lips. When they parted, she spoke the words that had been building since that first night in the corn shed. I choose you too. Choose this. Choose us. A pause, then truth. I love you, Eli Kerrigan. Didn't mean to, didn't think I could, but I do. His smile lit the room better than any fire. I love you too, Clara Mills. Have since you stood in my barn with those stubborn eyes and refused to be less than you are. They sat together as the fire burned low, planning quietly. Not grand schemes, but simple things: expanding the vegetable garden, improving the irrigation system, maybe adding a room to the house. The future spread before them, no longer threatening but full of possibility. We should do this proper, Eli said eventually. Court the way you deserve. Let the town see we're serious. Then marry me. When you're ready, when you're sure. But marry me, Clara. Make this real and lasting and ours. Clara's breath caught. Marriage had meant ownership for so long, meant losing herself in someone else's demands. But looking at Eli, she saw a different vision: partnership, equality, two people choosing each other daily. Ask me again come spring, she said, when the snow melts and the world's green again. Ask me then. I'll ask you every day till you say yes. Just spring will do. She kissed him again, sealing the promise. That night, Clara lay in her room, in what was becoming her home, and marveled at the turn her life had taken. From frozen corn shed to warm house, from running to staying, from alone to loved. Outside, winter still held the land, but inside, spring had already begun. Winter slowly gave way to spring, ice melting into mud, bare branches showing the first hints of green. Clara had lived through many seasons, but this one felt different, like the world was awakening alongside her heart. She stood at the kitchen window one morning, watching Eli work with a new colt in the paddock. His patience with the skittish animal reminded her of those first weeks, how he'd given her space and time to trust. Bear lay at her feet, content in his role as her constant shadow. You look at him like he hung the moon. Clara turned to find Mary Stewart in the doorway, smiling. The schoolteacher had become a regular visitor, part of the growing network of women who gathered at the Kerrigan Ranch to plan quiet revolutions. Maybe he did, Clara said, not embarrassed to be caught staring. My moon, anyway. Mary laughed. Good for you, both of you. This place needed life again. They worked together on the weeks planning 2 women from Cedar Falls needing temporary shelter. A girl from the valley whose father wanted to marry her off at 15. The network had grown beyond what any of them expected. Women helping women find work, safety, choices. Eli doesn't mind? Mary asked. All these disruptions to his quiet life? Clara smiled, remembering his words the night before as they'd made up beds for incoming guests. House is too big for just us anyway. Might as well use it for something good. He minds less than you'd think, says his brother would approve. Tom Kerrigan was a good man. Idealistic, maybe, but good. Mary paused. Eli's more practical, but the same good heart. You brought it out of him again. Before Clara could respond, hoofbeats sounded in the yard. Not the easy pace of neighbors visiting, but urgent, hard riding. Both women moved to the window. A young woman girl, really slumped over a spent horse, her dress torn, feet bare despite the cold morning. Clara ran outside. Mary close behind. "Help!" the girl gasped as Clara caught her sliding from the saddle. "Please, he's coming!" They got her inside, Eli appearing from the barn, taking in the scene with quick understanding. The girl she gave her name as Ruth was maybe 17, pretty despite bruises marking her face and arms. "My PA," she managed between sips of water. "Wants me to marry his friend. Man older than him. I said no. She touched her bruised face. Heard about this place. About you." "You're safe now," Clara said firmly. But through the window, she could see dust rising on the road. Multiple riders, coming fast. Eli saw it too. "How many men?" "Pa and 3 others, maybe more." Ruth's voice shook. "They'll drag me back. You don't know what they're like." "We know enough." Clara helped Ruth to her feet. "Mary, take her upstairs. The attic room. Bar the door." "Clara." "Go, now." As Mary hustled Ruth away, Clara turned to Eli. "This could be bad. Worse than Walter and Briggs. These sound like the kind of men who—" "I know." He was already loading his rifle. "But we don't turn away people who need help. Not from this house." The riders thundered into the yard. 4 men, hard-faced and armed. The leader, a man with cold eyes and a week's worth of beard, dismounted without invitation. "Where's my daughter?" "Don't know your daughter, friend." Eli stood on the porch, rifle casual but ready. "You're on private property. Don't play games. Her horse is in your yard." The man Ruth's father stepped forward. Bear growled low and threatening. "I'm Jacob Morse, and I'll have what's mine." "Children aren't property," Clara said, moving to stand beside Eli. "No matter what you think you own." Morse's eyes raked over her, dismissive and cruel. "The horse speaks. Yeah, I heard about you. The Dane girl who run off, living in sin, filling other girls' heads with ideas." "Careful," Eli warned, but Clara touched his arm. "Mr. Morse," she said, voice steady despite her racing heart. "Your daughter came here hurt and scared. What kind of father does that to his child?" "Kind that knows discipline. Girl needs to learn her place." "Where is she?" "Somewhere safe from you," Clara said, "and that's where she'll stay." One of Morse's men laughed. Ugly sound. "Big talk for a woman. Maybe you need a lesson too." He started forward. Eli's rifle swung up, centered on his chest. "Another step and you'll be explaining to St. Peter why you threatened a lady on her own land." "Your land," Morse spat. "Heard different. Heard this is the Kerrigan place." "It is." Eli's voice carried quiet certainty. "And Miss Mills tends it with me, makes it hers to defend. We'll see what the sheriff says about harboring runaways." "Same sheriff who ruled Miss Mills a free woman. Same law that says children can't be beaten." Clara let steel enter her voice. "Go ahead, bring the sheriff. Let your daughter tell him how she got those bruises. Let the whole town hear what kind of man Jacob Morse is." Morse's face darkened. "You threatening me? Promising? You touch that girl again, force her into marriage, and everyone will know. Every person in 3 counties will hear how Jacob Morse sells his daughter like cattle, how he beats her for saying no, how 4 grown men came armed to drag away a 17-year-old girl. She's my blood." "Blood doesn't give you the right to destroy her." Clara thought of her mother, her siblings, all the children broken by those who should protect them. "Leave now. Don't come back. Let Ruth make her own choices." "Or what?" one of the other men, hand hovering near his gun. "You'll shoot us." "Won't need to." Clara smiled, cold as winter wind. "See, Mr. Morse, you're not the only one with friends. That network of women you sneer at, it includes wives, sisters, daughters, women who cook your food, wash your clothes, know your secrets. How long you think you'll last once word spreads about what you really are?" She saw the moment it landed the realization that women's whispers could destroy a man's reputation faster than any bullet. Morse's jaw worked, fury and calculation warring in his eyes. "This isn't over," he said finally. "Girl's gotta come home sometime." "Maybe when she chooses, if she chooses." Clara stepped forward, and Bear moved with her, teeth bared. "But that's her decision, not yours, not anymore." The standoff stretched taut. Then Morse spat at her feet, gestured to his men. "Mount up. We'll handle this legal." They rode away, dust and threats in their wake. Clara sagged against the porch post, adrenaline leaving her shaky. "You all right?" Eli's arm came around her, solid and safe. "Getting tired of angry men thinking they own the world." She leaned into him. "But yes, all right." Mary appeared at the door. "They're gone." "For now." Clara straightened. "How's Ruth?" "Scared but safe, asking for you." They found Ruth in the attic room, a space they'd prepared for exactly this purpose, with a sturdy bar on the door and window too small for a man to fit through. She looked younger in the morning light, bruises stark against pale skin. "They left?" Ruth's voice was small. "For now." Clara sat beside her on the narrow bed. "But you're safe here, long as you need." "I don't have money." "Don't need it. You'll work like everyone else, cooking, cleaning, whatever needs doing. Fair trade for room and board while you figure out your next steps." Ruth's eyes filled. "Why? Why help me?" "Because someone helped me once, gave me shelter when I had nothing, showed me I was worth more than what others wanted to make me." Clara glanced at Eli, standing guard by the door. "Now I pass that on." They settled Ruth in, Mary agreeing to stay a few days to help her adjust. As evening fell, Clara found herself back at the kitchen window, watching the road, waiting for trouble's return. "They'll be back," she said as Eli joined her. "Probably, but we'll be ready." He pulled her close. "No regrets." "None. You—" "Only that spring's here and you haven't given me an answer yet." "Despite everything," Clara laughed. "Subtle." "Never claimed to be." He turned her to face him. "Clara Mills, I've watched you turn this house into a beacon. Watched you face down men twice your size with nothing but truth and courage. Watched you build something from nothing but determination and care." "Eli, let me finish, please." His hands framed her face, gentle as always. "I've loved you since that night in the corn shed, but I love you more now. Love your strength, your stubbornness, your refusal to shrink. Marry me, not because you need protection or propriety, but because I want to stand beside you in whatever comes, because this house is better with you in it, because I am." Clara's eyes burned. "That's quite a speech for a quiet man." "Been practicing." His thumbs brushed away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "So, will you have me?" She thought of winter nights turned warm, of empty rooms filled with purpose, of a life built on choosing rather than being chosen. Thought of this man who'd offered shelter without conditions, who'd stood between her and harm, who saw her fully and loved what he saw. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, Eli Kerrigan, I'll marry you." His kiss tasted like coming home, like spring after endless winter, like every promise worth keeping. Bear barked approval. Mary cheered from the doorway, and Ruth peered down from the stairs with the first smile she'd managed. "When?" Eli asked when they parted. "Soon, before summer." Clara touched his face. "I've spent too much time running and waiting. Want to start living." They married 2 weeks later in the ranch's main room, wildflowers from the meadow brightening every surface. Mary stood as Clara's witness, the doctor as Eli's. Ruth helped with cooking. Other women from the network filling the space with laughter and tears and joy. Clara wore the blue dress, altered now to fit perfectly. Eli wore his Sunday best and a smile that made him look years younger. When the preacher asked if anyone objected, Bear barked once, then settled, as if to say he approved this union he'd helped create. "Do you?" Clara Mills, take this man. I do. No hesitation, no fear, just choice, clear and certain. The same certainty in Eli's voice, I do. And then they were married. Partnership sealed in law as it had been sealed in practice. The kiss that followed held nothing of propriety and everything of promise. Later, as guests danced and sang, as Ruth laughed with merry students, as women who'd found safety here celebrated love winning over ownership, Clara stood with her husband on the porch. No regrets, she asked, echoing his earlier question. Only that Tom isn't here to see it. Eli pulled her close. He'd have loved you. Would have said I took too long to see what was right in front of me. He brought us together. In a way, his memory, his coat, his room becoming shelter. Clara leaned into Eli's warmth. He's here. Shelter's yours, Eli murmured, echoing those first words that had saved her. The house, the ranch, my heart, all yours. Clara Kerrigan. And mine yours. She turned in his arms, kissed him as the sun set behind the mountains. Partners. Partners, he agreed. Bear pushed between them, demanding attention, and they laughed. Behind them, the house rang with music and joy, filled with women who'd found safety and men who understood that strength meant standing beside, not over. Once, Clara had run from a house that trapped her, had nearly died in a corn shed rather than submit to being owned. Now she stood in a home she'd helped build, married to a man who loved her fierce independence as much as her gentle heart, surrounded by chosen family. Thank you, she whispered against Eli's chest. For what? For checking that shed, for offering shelter, for waiting until I could choose you back. His arms tightened around her. Would do it again. Every cold night, every confrontation, every moment led us here. Here, home. Safety that came not from hiding but from standing ground. Love that grew not from need but from want, from choosing daily to build something together. The cabin wasn't big. The roof leaked in heavy rain. The walls still creaked in strong wind. But it held something real, something lasting, something chosen. It held love. And that was shelter enough. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to hear where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss what this tale meant to you. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850. Give this video a like and hit that hype button to help more people discover these frontier tales of love and courage.